As I said, thank you all so much for spending your Thursday evening with us tonight to kind of go over some financial aid basics. My name is Hannah Smith. I'm the new student coordinator at St. Louis University in the Office of Student Financial Services. So I get to work with our lovely admission folks and work on the prospective student side of things, doing financial aid 101s and Fafsa presentations in the community as well. So I have my colleague, Dave Rice here, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. Like Hannah said, thank you for spending your evening with us. Dave Rice, Student Financial Services, and I kind of take care of some of the counseling and outreach pieces. So just looking forward to spending the evening with you. Most important, make sure you get your questions answered as Hannah takes us through the presentation. So I'll turn it back.
Yeah, so kind of some housekeeping for tonight. So we are in a webinar style Zoom here. So your camera and mics will remain off for the entirety of the session, but you do have the capabilities to use the chat feature and the Q&A feature throughout the webinar to ask questions. Typically, we like to get through the presentation and then we'll open it up to questions and start addressing those questions live. So if you have a question throughout about a topic that we're talking about, feel free to pop it into the Q&A. Just know that it might not get answered immediately until we open it up to questions at the end. So I'm happy to address any questions, as I know that financial aid can be kind of a confusing process and one that you might have a lot of questions about. Hopefully our presentation will kind of take some of the mystery out of this process and answer a lot of questions that are on your mind before you even have to ask them. So just to kind of give you an overview of what we're going to go over tonight. So we're going to talk about types of financial aid. So really break down, people talk about financial aid and throw that term around a lot when they're talking about a lot of different things. So kind of break down those types of financial aid, how to apply for those different types of financial aid, and where to seek out those different pieces of aid as well. We're going to go over everyone's favorite government form, the free application for federal student aid, and hopefully leave you with some tips and tricks as we go into the FAFSA season and allow you to feel really prepared when you're actually sitting down to fill out the FAFSA. We'll also kind of go over financial aid offers, when to expect them, and questions to ask when you're looking at those different offers from different institutions to really figure out how you can make a best financial decision for you and your family where you're wanting to attend college. And then just in general, we're going to go over the financial aid timeline. Like I said, there's typically a lot of mystery around the financial aid process and the timeline and when you have to do things. And so hopefully we'll take some of the mystery out of that tonight and kind of lay out the timeline for you so that you feel really prepared going into your college search, feeling like you have that financial aid timeline down. Before we jump into the types of aid, we really like to go over just the goals in general of awarding aid. Really is first and foremost to reward your student for the achievements that they've been able to accrue over their high school career. So these could be achievements in the academic sphere with merit aid. These could be talent scholarships or grants that they receive for additional activities, extracurricular or co-curricular that they're participating in high school. So first and foremost, that financial aid is just meant to reward your student for their achievements that they've been able to accomplish over the past 4 years. And really on the institutional side, we just want to make sure that we have a standardized process for distributing those funds as equitably as we can. So we have a limited amount of funds, and we want to make sure that those funds are going to the families that really need it to be able to make our institutions a reality for those students. As I said, a lot of people can throw around financial aid in a lot of different areas. And so really all types of financial aid can boil down to one of these 4 categories here. And they really fall into 2 big umbrellas. One is gift aid, and that's where things like scholarships, grants, those things fall. And we call it gift aid because it's free money, essentially. You don't have to pay that back after you graduate. And so that's just essentially a discount that you're receiving for tuition, for fees, for room and board at your different institutions that you're looking at. So these could come in the form of merit-based scholarships with your application for admission. As I mentioned before, talent-based scholarships for extracurricular or co-curricular activities that you're doing in your high school, or if you're a student athlete, you could be getting some athletic aid there as well. That kind of all falls within the scholarship umbrella. Grants typically are need-based. So these would be based off of your income and family contribution that you're able to kind of put forward to an education. And so these would include things like need-based aid from institutions, state aid, and then of course the federal aid. So federal Pell Grant or the federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant fall within the grant category. But as you said, scholarships and grants, both free money that you don't have to pay back. And so these are the highly sought after types of aid. This is really what we're trying to go for when we talk about maximizing your aid opportunities and minimizing your future costs on down the line. Self-help aid also falls within this umbrella of financial aid, but typically these work a little bit differently than just the free aid that are taken in a lump sum. So loans qualify as financial aid, and we're going to talk about some different loan programs that are available to students and to parents to help with that college cost. And then employment opportunities. So you all might be familiar with the federal work-study program. You would have to qualify for this program based on filing your Fafsa, and different institutions have some different thresholds for how much you can earn through the federal work-study program. But this works a little bit differently than those other types of aid because it doesn't just come off in a lump sum. So you actually have to go out and find a job on campus. You have to work those hours, and then the students get paid just like they would a regular paycheck. So that comes directly to them. And then they have the option to put those funds directly towards their cost of attendance, their direct billed costs at the university, or they can use them as discretionary funds. And that's typically what we recommend. Those federal work-study funds work really well as just kind of discretionary income for your student throughout the year so that they can have some extra spending money for necessities and some fun things while they're away from home. So this is really just our only SLU specific slide. And we put this in here just to kind of give you an idea of what those merit scholarship opportunities look like at a four-year private institution like St. Louis University. So here at SLU, you could qualify for a merit-based scholarship, and this is automatic with your application for admission, from $10,000 to $25,000 a year based on your ACT, GPA, and or SAT. So this is one big question that's going to come up in the financial aid process, and one that you kind of need to keep on your mind as you are applying to different institutions for admission and for financial aid. So a lot of schools have moved to test optional admission. So that means you don't have to submit an ACT or SAT score as part of your application for admission to be considered at that institution. One big question that you'll need to ask, though, is, are you test optional for both admission and scholarships? So there are some schools that are test optional for admission, but you still have to submit a test score to qualify for those university scholarships. So definitely make that distinction as you're going in, and make sure that you are prepared with a test score just in case you have to provide it to be able to put your name in the running for those institutional scholarships as well. There are also some additional competitive scholarship opportunities that might be available at schools like SLU. For instance, our presidential scholarship is a competitive scholarship. So that would require an additional application on top of your application for admission. But you would have to have a certain GPA to be able to qualify to apply, and then submit that additional application. Same with our MLK scholarship. This has an emphasis on leadership and service. So students that have been engaging in that a lot in their high school might be really well suited for those competitive scholarships as well. This might be a term that you see quite a bit, the term stackable. So I just want to address that really quick. So if you see the word stackable anywhere in the financial aid process, essentially that just means that award can go on top of or in addition to your other aid that's been offered to you at that institution. So for instance, if you were admitted to SLU and you got a $10,000 scholarship and then you qualified for our MLK scholarship, you received that for $3,000, you would have a total of $13,000 of stackable awards that you would have per year at St. Louis University. So just wanted to kind of clarify that term, because that's something that you might hear a lot in that financial aid process, is the stackable piece. So how do we apply for these different types of aid? So typically at institutions, your application for admission is also going to be your application for merit-based scholarships. That's another big question that you'll want to ask when you're applying for admission is your application for admission also the application for merit scholarships at that institution? That's important because you don't want to leave any money on the table there. And there might be some additional questions or an additional application that you'll need to fill out to put your name in the running for institutional scholarships. So like I said, typically it's all in one. If you're applying for admission, schools just kind of assume you also want some scholarships, but that might not always be the case. So definitely check on that. When we're talking about need-based aid, typically schools will ask you to file that free application for federal student aid, or the Fafsa. And we'll kind of talk through where to find that application and how to fill that out tonight. But this will determine your federal aid eligibility for things like the federal grants and your federal student loans. But it'll also determine your eligibility for state aid in most cases and institutional aid in most cases. So a lot of schools don't require the FAFSA to have your merit scholarships, but almost all institutions are going to require that you have that FAFSA on file at that institution to be able to qualify for need-based aid. Css Profile is another financial application that might be required of some schools, typically schools that are a little bit more selective and are promising to meet a certain percentage of your need will ask you to fill out the Css Profile. This just goes into a little bit more detail about your income and asset information so that they can have a clearer picture of your financial, your family financial situation by asking some more in-depth information from you. So a good rule of thumb is that we never recommend that families pay for free aid, but this is one big exception. It is a legitimate application through College Board that schools can ask you to fill out. And so it does involve a fee to be able to fill out. But like I said, usually those are selective institutions that are promising to meet a certain percentage of demonstrated need there. So to apply for the FAFSA, Federal Student Aid has kind of consolidated a lot of their things onto one website. So there used to be kind of separate websites for a lot of the different things through the federal government and related to federal student aid. But now it's all kind of consolidated on studentaid.gov. So studentaid.gov, and you could quite literally just Google FAFSA and the FSA website is the first thing that's going to come up. You're just going to want to make sure that it ends in .gov and make sure that you're never paying to file the FAFSA because the first word in that acronym is free. So never pay to file the FAFSA, but we're going to go to studentaid.gov, apply for aid. And then there's just a link right there, complete the FAFSA form. So you'll be able to click that link there, start here. And the FAFSA for this year, so for students that are seniors this year that are applying for admission for the 23-24 academic year, we'll be filling out the 23-24 FAFSA, and that opens on October 1st. So just here in a couple of weeks, that will be available to you. And you only apply for the FAFSA or you only file the FAFSA for years that you're applying for aid. So if we have any juniors in the audience tonight, you wouldn't file the FAFSA for another year. And so you would complete the FAFSA in your student's senior year of high school and then any subsequent year that they're wanting to receive aid at their institutions. We recommend that just as soon as you can, fill it out, get it off your plate, check the box, and then you don't have to worry about it. Most need-based aid is awarded on a first come, first served basis. So it's a good idea to just get it off your plate and go ahead and file it as close to that October 1 opening date as you can. Now, if you file it in November or December, you're perfectly fine. But you do want to make sure that you're just staying up to date with priority deadlines at those different institutions that you're applying to. So making sure that you're not missing any big deadlines by waiting on filing that FAFSA will be key. Typically, February 1st is a big kind of FAFSA priority deadline. That's ours for St. Louis University, but that could differ from institution to institution. So as you're kind of crafting your list and submitting admission applications, it's a good idea to just make a list of all of those different deadlines at those different institutions so that you know, okay, when is my application for admission due? When is the priority scholarship deadline? And when do I need to have that FAFSA filed by? So to file the FAFSA it's really, I promise you, not that difficult. You really just need 30 minutes of time to be able to sit down and really focus and read every question thoroughly. Your FAFSA each year will be based on prior tax year information. So for seniors, again, you're filing the 23-24 FAFSA that's going to open on October 1st. So it will ask you for 2021 tax information. So 2 years prior to that first date listed in the academic year that you're applying for. You'll need an Fsa Id, which is essentially a login for both the student and one parent that's going to be listed on the FAFSA prior to filling it out. So you can establish that Fsa Id now, really for any grade of student. If you want to go ahead and establish that, I would just recommend that you don't establish it too far in advance because a lot of families get to that time to file the FAFSA and you have to recover your Fsa Id and recover your password because you don't remember the credentials, which is not the end of the world. It's definitely possible, but just make sure you keep those credentials in a safe space if you're planning on establishing that well in advance of you filing the FAFSA. There's going to be something called the IRS Data Retrieval Tool, or the IRS DRT, within the FAFSA form that allows you essentially to go out to the IRS website, put in your tax return information, and then it links your tax return from 2021 and gives you the ability to port in all of that tax and income information into the FAFSA form without you having to fill it out manually. So this is definitely something that we recommend for families as they're filling out the FAFSA. It makes it a little bit quicker for you that you don't have to hunt down all of that specific income and tax information within your tax documents. But it also, on the institutional side, shows us a level of accuracy that this was ported straight in from the IRS. So we know that this information is as accurate as possible. On every single question throughout the FAFSA form, there's a little question mark next to the field. And so you can hover over that question mark and it will give you information about where to find that piece of information that should go in that field, or additional information on why they're asking that question on the FAFSA form. So like I said, it truly is not that difficult. It just takes focus and attention on what they're asking you and where you can find that specific information. So definitely use those help tools throughout the form. That's going to help quite a bit. Kind of provide context to why they're asking some certain questions and provide you a little bit more information on where to find those particular pieces or particular numbers in most cases from tax returns or W-2s. FAFSA also publishes some practice tools. So you could go out and file a practice FAFSA if you're, just bored one night and you want to practice. They also publish a FAFSA worksheet each year, which I haven't seen the 23-24 FAFSA worksheet quite yet, but that would allow you to essentially, it gives you a highlight reel of every field that you could potentially need some additional information for. So you can compile your tax and income documents that just one time, fill out the worksheet, and then it's basically, it allows you to just go right into the FAFSA and then have all of that information super handy and out the ready for when you have to put it into the actual form. So definitely use the help tools throughout the form and then those practice tools. One big question that we get quite a bit about the FAFSA is, who is my parent and who do I have to put on the FAFSA as my parent? So this nifty little flow chart will kind of walk you through different scenarios. So if your parents are married to each other, shows you both are going to go on the FAFSA. If they're not married, but they live together, both are going to go on the FAFSA. If they are not married, if they don't live together, then you're going to determine what parent have you spent more time with, or did you live more with over the past 12 months? And if it truly is 50-50 split, you can't really determine who you spent more time with. You're going to report the information for the parent who provided more financial support for you over the past 12 months as a student. So this could be the tiebreaker typically is like who provides health insurance, who provides car insurance, things like that. You're going to put that parent that provided more than 50% financial support for you in the past 12 months on the FAFSA. Now, if your parent has remarried, then both your parent and their new spouse will have to go on your FAFSA form. If they're not remarried, you don't have to worry about additional parent information. It'll just be that one parent that's provided that financial support for you over the past year. And this diagram is available on federal student aid website on studentaid.gov as well. And there are some help tools. So once you get to the parent financial section on the FAFSA, it will have all of these scenarios lined out. So it'll say, are your parents married to each other? And then you can, it has some conditional logic in there. So you can toggle down and see the answers and see who exactly you're going to need to put on that FAFSA form. So once you file that free application for federal student aid or the FAFSA, it generates an expected family contribution or an EFC. And this is a calculation that uses federal methodology to determine how much your family can reasonably contribute towards your education for that year. And I say reasonably, very loosely, because if you are a family who has ever filed a FAFSA before and seen your expected family contribution, you are likely in the majority of families that say, okay, that's not reasonable. That's not expendable income that I can just pay towards my student education each year. So we know it's not a perfect science, but this is a calculation that's determined by the Department of Education. And it will be constant through all of the institutions that your student is applying for. So you get this one EFC for this specific aid year, and that's going to remain constant in all of those institutions that are asking for your student's FAFSA and packaging aid for them if they're admitted. The calculation uses both student and parent income and assets for the majority of students. There are some scenarios in which students could be considered independent, and then it would just be based on student income and assets. In the calculation, which surprises quite a few people, is that the student income and assets is weighed a little bit more heavily than the parent income and assets. And that's because in the eyes of the federal government, they're saying that this is the student's income, this is a student's asset, and they're going to use their assets and their income towards their education first, and then parents are going to come in to kind of help with what's left over. So if you have two students that are going through at the same time, and you're saying, why are our EFCs crazy different? It's the same parent income, same parent assets. It could be based on that student income and assets if one student's working and generating an income for that year and the other student is not. So this is a big distinction that we like to make as we kind of go into this award letter or financial aid offer conversation. And that's the distinction between direct cost and cost of attendance. So as you're out on school websites right now, looking at their tuition and cost page, you're likely looking at the direct costs. So you're thinking about tuition, mandatory fees, and room and board if your student is planning on living on campus. These are direct costs or billed costs, we call them. So these are directly billed through the university associated with their specific enrollment or residency on that campus. Essentially, these are services rendered. Cost of attendance includes those direct billed costs, but it also includes a series of estimates for things like books and supplies, transportation, personal expenses for students that represent kind of a maximum budget that your student can accept financial aid up to for that academic year. So the cost of attendance is likely going to be a little bit higher than what you're expected to see through those just direct costs alone. What this cost of attendance does is it allows a little bit of room for additional expenses for students to be able to accept aid in the form of grants, scholarships, or take out loans up to this full cost of attendance. And so if you're, for instance, taking out a Parent Plus loan up to full cost of attendance, it goes to the school first and it pays off the student's direct costs. And then the families would actually get a refund of those loan funds back in their pocket that they could use then for other education related expenses that falls within those estimate categories. So books and supplies, transportation, if the student needs a new laptop before they come to campus, things like that, that you could use those loan proceeds. And if we didn't give you those estimates and didn't give you that additional room, you would only be able to cover direct billed costs with your aid. So you could see a little bit of a difference, and there are some different philosophies in awarding at different institutions. And so there's some financial aid offers that would show you just direct costs, and there are some that are going to show you the full cost of attendance. And so just kind of be thinking about that as you look at those different offers so that you know you're comparing apples to apples there. As I mentioned before, your expected family contribution is going to remain constant at all of those different institutions that your student is applying for. So if you think about the cost of attendance at these different institutions being variable, and if you can kind of picture, so the most expensive institutions typically are number one, that red bar, four-year private schools. And then number two in yellow, maybe that's a four-year public. And then three, maybe that's a two-year community college for your student. So the cost of attendance are going to vary based on institution. Your EFC is going to remain the same at all of those different institutions. And so then that makes your need variable at those different institutions as well. So we'll kind of talk through how this affects primarily loan eligibility for students. So that federal direct student loan, you could be eligible for a portion of that to be subsidized, which essentially means it's not accruing interest while your student is in school, but they would have to have need that was demonstrated at that institution. And so that's cost of attendance minus the expected family contribution would give you your need at those different institutions. So your student might not qualify to have a subsidized loan at all of the institutions that they're applying for. This could also be the reason why one of your students, potentially if you have an older student already in school, why they qualified for some subsidized loans, and maybe if you wouldn't see subsidized loans on some younger students, financial aid offers. So just to kind of give you that visual there, expected family contribution is going to remain constant, but your need is going to change based on the cost of attendance at those different institutions. So once you're admitted to institutions and you have your FAFSA filed or you've received a scholarship from them, they're going to put together a financial aid offer that would essentially list all of your different types of financial aid in the form of scholarships, grants, loans, work opportunities. These are typically based on the FAFSA. So a lot of schools will still send out financial aid offers to students who haven't filed the FAFSA or haven't shared the FAFSA with the school. But if that's the case, you would likely only see a merit scholarship on this financial aid offer. But typically, if you filed the FAFSA, if you shared it with that school, they're going to give you kind of a comprehensive look at all of that different aid that you've been awarded from that institution and your federal and state aid as well. Typically, you'll see these after the start of the new year. So really February and March is when a lot of these financial aid offers are going to come in. And as I said, it's important to look at the distinction between the direct billed costs and cost of attendance on these different financial aid offers to make sure that you're really comparing the full picture of those institutions to, apples to apples institutions together. And then it's also important to really look with a keen eye at the different types of aid that they're showing you. So you'll have your scholarships, your grants on there that will hopefully be in a separate category as kind of gift aid or free aid. Some schools will go ahead and show you your loan eligibility, not just for your student loans, but for Parent Plus loans or private or alternative student loans as well. So you could get a financial aid offer that you're skimming through and it just says remainder, remaining estimated balance, $0. But that means there might be something up in that loan section that you're not anticipating. So just look at those, like I said, with a really keen eye, make sure that you're kind of taking notice of the different types of aid that they're showing you. And again, make sure that you're kind of comparing apples to apples. So thinking about gift aid as that really kind of highly sought after and most desirable type of aid, and really just focusing on loans to make sure that you're financing the rest of that remaining balance wisely. So one loan program that's offered directly to students are the federal direct student loans. So students would be eligible for a certain threshold of eligibility through just filing the FAFSA alone. So for freshmen, for first year students, you would be eligible for $5,500 in a direct student loan, and you could be eligible for a portion of that to be subsidized based on your EFC and your need at those different institutions. So again, the subsidized loan is not accruing interest while you're in school. And so you could choose to accept or decline any portion of this $5,500 that you want to be able to use towards your freshman year, your first year expenses. It is a fixed interest rate for the life of the loan. So for 22-23, it's a fixed rate of 4.99%. Now, it is a variable rate in that the interest is typically different from year to year, but once you have a loan, so all loans originated in 22-23 will have that 4.99 fixed interest rate for the remainder of the term of the loan. Repayment isn't required while you're in school. So you have 6 months after you graduate or you fall below a part-time status. So if you were ever students to fall below 6 hours in a semester, you would start your grace period of 6 months, and then your loans would kick into repayment 6 months after your grace period began. Students do have kind of increasing eligibility throughout the years. So I'm going to toggle to my next slide here that shows you by grade level, your loan eligibility is going to go up a little bit. So if you have 0 to 29 credit hours, you'll have that $5,500 threshold. If you're a sophomore by credits, you'll have $6,500, and then junior and senior year, you'll have $7,500 in that federal direct student loan. And these are loans in the student's name. And that's for dependent students. So there are some things on the FAFSA that would allow a student to be deemed independent and therefore not have to provide their parent information on the FAFSA. Those are things like at risk of being homeless or was homeless for a period of time preceding the aid year that they were applying for aid. It could be that they're an orphan, a foster student, a ward of the court, an emancipated minor. If you're married, that could deem you as independent. If they have dependents of their own, so if they have a child, they could be considered independent on the Fafsa. But there's a series of questions that they'll have to answer to kind of determine that dependency status. And then the Fafsa will tell you real time, okay, you're considered a dependent student, so you have to provide parent information. Or, okay, you're an independent student because you indicated yes to one of these questions. You don't have to provide parent data. So because independent students theoretically don't have parental support, they have some higher loan limits than students who have parental support from the outside. Outside scholarships and college savings plans can also be some additional pieces of financial aid that can kind of help subsidize the cost of attendance as much as possible. So outside scholarships are essentially just scholarships from other sources outside of colleges and universities. And you can just send notification of these awards to the schools that you're applying for or have been admitted to make sure that they know that you have additional aid coming. And my next slide is going to be how you can kind of start that private scholarship search and some ways that you can seek out some additional private or outside scholarship aid. College savings plans or 529 plans are a great way to contribute to your educational expenses as well. We just recommend that you reach out early to your provider and get an idea of how you can authorize that aid to come directly from your 529 plan to the institution that your student is planning on attending. And typically it's just good practice to make sure that that money goes directly from the provider to the institution that you're wanting to pay, just so there's no additional tax implications or anything like that. We're definitely not tax experts, so consult your 529 provider and consult a tax expert to kind of see what the best course of action there would be for you. As I mentioned, this is a good place to start for private scholarships. So the FastWebs, the College Boards of the world, those are going to be kind of these national scholarship search engines that cast a really wide net at a bunch of outside and private scholarships. So you can start with these websites and kind of work your way locally. Typically, local scholarships, they have fewer students applying, and so you're just going to maximize your opportunities to actually get that additional aid. So for Missouri students, St. Louis graduates or My Scholarship Central are great places to start because that has a lot of local aid, local scholarships from different organizations. And then just start asking around the different organizations that you're a part of or, places that you attend. So ask your church if they have a scholarship program, ask a Rotary Club or alumni clubs or Parents Works. Do you have a scholarship program? A lot of times there are some kind of hidden scholarships. And I will say with private and outside scholarships, typically these are not going to be super large full tuition scholarships that are going to be able to be offered to students. And a lot of, especially the local ones, are going to be maybe $500 or $1,000, but that really does help when you're looking at monthly payments for paying tuition every month for 4 years. So every little bit can help, and you can continue this private scholarship search through your time in college as well. It doesn't have to stop with your freshman year. You can keep seeking out additional sources of aid throughout your time in school as well. So this might seem a little elementary, but this is essentially how we're calculating your remaining balance. So we're taking all the costs associated with attending an institution, so things like tuition, mandatory fees, housing, meal plans, if you're planning on living on campus, parking, health insurance, books and supplies, all the costs that would go into getting a college education. minus your aid that you've received from all sources. So that's scholarships, grants, loans, work opportunities, all of that type of aid to get your remaining balance. And once you have this remaining balance, they're really, I think this is where a lot of the mystery kind of comes in, and where our minds kind of run wild with all of the different possibilities that there are to be able to cover this remaining balance. But really, once we've got it here, there's three main ways to be able to cover your remaining balance at your different institutions. And the first, I should just say, these options are already assuming that you've made a decision on that federal direct student loan first. So that's typically the first loan that we recommend to families if they're interested in any additional financing through loans. It's typically the lowest interest rate. It's in the student's name, so it's non-credit qualifying since it's through the federal government. And those typically have the most flexible repayment plans as well for students. So make a decision on that federal student loan, and then these are your three options. Either out of pocket, you can pay in full. Most schools will do billing by semester, so you could pay in full for the semester, for the year, depending on how they do their billing at that specific college or university. Most schools will also have a payment plan option. So if you're on a payment plan, you could spread that balance out over the course of the semester, over the course of the academic or calendar year, to be able to make installments on that remaining balance as well. College savings plans, this is where they come in too. You could make a lump sum payment from a college savings plan and then pay the rest out of pocket on a payment plan for the remainder of the semester or remainder of the year. If out of pocket is not an option for that remaining balance, additional financing options can be explored in the form of a Parent Plus loan or private or alternative student loans. So this Parent Plus loan is a federal loan that would be in the parent's name. It is credit qualifying. So parents would have to go out to studentaid.gov, apply for the Parent Plus loan, and be accepted based on credit. The interest rate for that loan is 7.54% for 22-23. And here it shows you a little bit the estimated monthly payment. If you were to borrow $10,000 on a federal Parent Plus loan over a 10-year repayment term, you're looking at about $118 a month to repay just that $10,000. For private student loans, typically these are going to be in the student's name, but they are credit qualifying. And since a lot of 17, 18-year-olds don't have a lot of credit built up, parents would likely be listed as the cosigner on these private loans. And these are typically kind of last-ditch effort to get that remaining balance covered, because we do estimate that interest rate at about 10% for private loans. But these would be finding loans through the Discover student loan, through College Avenue, through Sallie Mae, those types of lenders that offer private or alternative student loans. $10,000 on a private loan with that estimated 10% interest rate, again, over a 10-year repayment term, you're looking at about $132 a month. So here's some additional information kind of comparing your other loan options. So borrower for Parent Plus loan, of course, that's the parent. The private and alternative loans typically are the student. The interest rates can be variable between the private and alternative loans, but again, we estimate those at about 10%. Repayment for the Parent Plus loan kicks into effect 60 days after the loan is paid in full. So typically, if you're applying for a Parent Plus loan, you're applying for the academic year. So it's going to pay half in fall, half in spring, and then repayment would kick into effect 60 days after that spring payment. So the loan is paid in full in January. You would start repayment in about March. If the parent is denied for a Parent Plus loan based on their credit, the student is then can be awarded an additional $4,000 in unsubsidized loan eligibility that will get them up to that independent loan limit for those independent students. So if parents are unable to secure a Parent Plus loan based on their credit, students have a little bit more wiggle room in that federal direct student loan for them. And this is just kind of comparing the repayment estimates for the different loan options that we talked about. And as you can see, this is why we kind of recommend this order in terms of looking for additional financing options. So first, that federal direct student loan. As you can see, it's the lowest interest rate here. The term is the same. So your monthly payment is going to be the lowest out of these three options. So $106 per month per $10,000 you borrow in that federal direct student loan. For Parent Plus loan, as we talked about $118 per $10,000 borrowed. And then for private student loans with that estimated 10% interest rate, you're looking at about $132. So as I said, we'll kind of lay out the timeline for senior year. So for those seniors that are on with us tonight, you're probably in the thick of submitting admission applications. And if not already submitting applications, really kind of honing in on your list and where you want to apply. Maybe you've gone on a couple college visits last year and beginning this year, and really kind of determining where you want to submit those applications. By October 1st, you can create your FSA IDs so that you're really prepared to sit down and file the FAFSA starting October 1 when it opens. As I mentioned, award notices or those financial aid offers usually don't come until the start of the new year. So really February and March are when you're going to start seeing those award notices roll in earnest. And you can really make a really informed decision, see your bottom line at those different institutions that you're weighing, and make your final decision by May 1st. So National College Decision Day, you'll submit your deposits by May 1st and accept any financial aid that you want at that institution that you're planning on enrolling in. And then that summertime, I know it's a really exciting time with graduation parties and, maybe fun summer plans for after your senior year. But do spend some time kind of focusing in on making a plan for covering that remaining balance. Parents, you can start applying for Parent Plus loans or private or alternative loans if you know you're going to need some additional financing options to be able to cover that remaining balance. And then for that federal direct student loan, students have to complete master promissory note on studentaid.gov and also complete loan entrance counseling. Just gives them some additional information on the interest rates, how those accrue, and how your student can borrow really wisely through that federal direct loan program. And then July and August really is just kind of finalizing payment arrangements, finalizing your enrollment, you're registering for classes, you're finding out housing assignments, all of the exciting things that happen, maybe going to a summer orientation for your institution, moving in August and starting classes. So it's going to go really, really quickly, but know that you have a lot of resources here to help you through this process as well. We always refer students back to their high school counselors. Their college and career counselors at their high school can be a really valuable resource for students that are kind of trying to navigate this process, and they can provide a lot of guidance and a lot of answers to questions that you have at this point. But speaking of, I'm going to open it up to questions and see what questions we've gotten in the Q&A and the chat to see if we can address any of those for you.
We were caught up. We got one more question. What if you do early decision at a school but don't agree with the financial aid package offered?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So there are multiple kind of application plans that you can take when you're applying to different institutions. Early decision is a application plan that is binding. So if you apply early decision to an institution, first off, you can't do this accidentally. So the student has to sign off, the parents have to sign off, and the high school counselor has to sign off that they have talked you through all of the options. They've talked you through the contract, and you are aware that this is a binding decision. So before you apply anywhere early decision, I would just make triple sure that you are well-versed in the intricacies of that contract, because it is binding. You're saying by submitting your early decision application, you will attend that institution if you're admitted. And that's barring any financial aid that you receive from that institution as well. So make sure that you have talked to your parents, that you've talked to your high school counselor and your admission counselor at those different institutions, and make sure you know that early decision is really the right path for you. If you're not super confident submitting that application, barring all financial aid, then I would recommend taking an early action or just rolling admission application path. Those are non-binding. With early action, you do get some priority still with admission and scholarships at different institutions, but that's non-binding. So you don't have to sign any kind of contract or enter into any sort of agreement for schools that you're applying to early action. So if you're worried about financials and it's really going to depend, your enrollment is really going to depend on that financial piece of things, I would recommend maybe shying away from early decision and doing early action or rolling admission instead.
Good. Is there a deadline for the CSS profile?
So not that I know of. I think this would depend on your different institutions that are asking for the CSS profile. They might have a priority deadline. If you file by a certain date, you know, they guarantee that you're going to get your financial aid offer by, you know, a promised date. So I would check with the institution that's asking for that CSS profile if they have a priority deadline or if it's a hard and fast deadline to get your CSS profile in.
That's all the questions that we have in the Q&A.
Okay, perfect. So I did see, just to kind of address to the group too, a question about federal work study. And we get questions all the time, you know, what are the advantages of working a federal work study job versus just a regular retail job off campus? And so if you, when you're filing the FAFSA, you'll see that federal work study question. And we always recommend, it's always good to just say yes to that. Typically, if you don't explicitly say yes, schools won't package you for federal work study, even if you fall within the criteria to be awarded. So say yes to that question. And I assure you there are fail-safes in place that aren't going to hold you to that decision at your different institutions. But that just kind of maximizes your aid opportunities there. And then certainly with a federal work study job, you are working within your academic calendar at your institution. So it kind of guarantees you don't have to work when you're on breaks or when classes are out. It also offers a little bit more flexibility because your supervisors at your job are also, you know, staff members on campus, and they know first and foremost you're here to get your education at our institution. And so they can give a little bit of leniency to students who maybe really have to study for an exam or, you know, are having a really busy week with other curricular or extracurricular events. So there's a little bit more flexibility in terms of time and hours that you can work there. And there are some additional protections for students that work federal work study jobs as well. So I think that's just, it's good to take advantage of if you're awarded it, and just to make sure that you're maximizing those opportunities for you, just make sure that you say yes to that on the FAFSA.
A couple of questions still coming in. Follow up on early decision. Do applicants for early decision have a better chance of getting aid?
So it depends on the institution, I would say, but typically early decision students, they're getting priority for both admission and for scholarships. Now for need-based aid, I would say that's all going to go based on your FAFSA typically. And so early decision students likely wouldn't be in a different pool to be qualified for more need-based aid, but they could get priority since those are, you know, the first students that are typically admitted to the institution. they have priority for those merit scholarships.
Couple of questions for international students. First of all, are there special financial help programs for international students, and which documents are needed for international student applications? I posted some citizenship stuff for the FAFSA in the chat that you can check, but these are being more specific questions.
Yeah, so if you're an international student that doesn't fall within those kind of eligible non-citizen criteria to be able to file the FAFSA, it would depend on your institution, kind of what aid opportunities there are available to you. Typically, the merit scholarships are going to look pretty similar to domestic students coming from within the country. And so you would be in the running for those merit scholarships. For instance, at St. Louis University, you would be awarded a merit scholarship just like any other student would be. And you are eligible to apply for those competitive scholarships. So the presidential scholarship and the MLK scholarship, you would be eligible to apply for those. A lot of schools might also ask for some additional information. The Css Profile might be one where institutions are asking international students to fill that out because they're not eligible to file the FAFSA. So international students might be filling out the Css Profile even in more frequency than domestic students would be, to kind of determine what your financial situation looks like and be able to award need-based aid based on that whole picture of your finances there.
Question about how long does it take to fill out the FAFSA, and can you fill it out ahead of time and then submit it on October 1st?
Yeah, so it really just takes, I would say, between half an hour and an hour. So 30 minutes to an hour. And that's just kind of like focused, uninterrupted time. If you want to finish it in one setting, you'll be able to do that. You won't be able to get into the form until October 1st, but you can utilize those FAFSA practice tools beforehand and fill out that worksheet beforehand that's on studentaid.gov. As I said, I haven't seen the 23-24 worksheet quite yet from Student Aid, but you would be able to fill out that worksheet beforehand with all of that kind of pertinent tax and income information that's kind of hard to hunt down, and then just take that straight into the FAFSA and plug in numbers there. And if you're really worried about ease and time that it's going to take to file the FAFSA, you can save and leave the form and come back to it later. You'll establish something called a save key when you get into the FAFSA the first time. So you can save your place and always come back if you don't have those, additional, or if you don't have the full, uninterrupted time to focus on that form. So.
We had a question about someone who's having a hard time clicking on the links that we've been posting in the chat. They're getting a 404 error, and I checked a couple of them. They're working good. The only thing I would say is maybe possibly try a different browser.
Okay, so I will put our contact information up here as the last slide, just to give you an idea of who we are and how to contact us if you have additional questions. Tonight is being recorded, so we'll put the recording up on our website so you can reference the actual webinar and the slides later on if you need some additional information, and we'll email out that information to our attendees and all of the registered folks that registered and were able to join us tonight as well. But definitely reach out in the meantime if there's any additional questions that you have or concerns that you have going into the financial aid process. Even if SLU is nowhere on your students list that they want to apply, we're more than happy to help with the financial aid side of things at different institutions as well.
We're caught up on questions. And thank you to those of you that are saying thank you. Those are several of those coming in, but just always, we enjoy getting to spend the evening with you. I'm sorry when these webinars we don't get to see each other, but good chance to spend time with each other.
Alrighty, well, thank you all for joining us tonight. And we do have a FAFSA presentation that will be the same style coming up on October 11th, same time, 6:30. And so join us for that presentation if you'd like more in-depth information about that free application for federal student aid. But thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, guys.